Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Greetings.
It's great to see you in such fine health. You're preserving yourself very well in your later years, I must say.
Well, one tries.
Yes.
It's a case of pay me now or pay me later.
Now, would you like to favor our extensive audience with a bit of wit, or tossing a pearl or two out? I notice you've written something on the back of your hand here that you might make use of.
What?
No.
I actually do have an aphorism. I'm sure that based as we are in Macon, there are a bunch of Allman Brothers fans out there. And of course, were you an Allman Brothers fan in your day, or?
At a polite distance. Mostly I was locked in the library when many people were out doing this. I was studying
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Well, one of their more famous albums was named Eat a Peach, and I am wondering if there's an allusion there to, of course, one of the greatest modern poems in history by T.S. Eliot.
The Wasteland, right.
Prufrock, actually.
Joe, dare I eat a peach? Yes.
Do I dare to eat a peach, which is from Prufrock. But right poet, T.S. Eliot.
Wow.
So.
Okay.
And the Allman Brothers are saying, take that dare, do it.
On that, I guess, those comments, I'll make this general observation. You know, you're aging, Bucky, rapidly, and I have to say that I am too.
Well, we're less young.
We're both on our as we sail through life's ups and downs. We're both getting into senior decades, and one of the things that I must comment on is popular culture has escaped me. As I mentioned, back in the youthful times, I was locked in the library, and I was memorizing the Krebs cycle night and day. But having said that, maybe you could enlighten me a little bit on popular culture, and I think there's some notoriety has come your way that you're a presenter at a Dragon Con.
At Dragon Con, yes.
Now, why don't you explain also to me, what exactly is Dragon Con, and what does all this mean? Maybe you could illuminate.
I'll certainly do that. And yeah, I was locked in the library too. I really came to popular culture at a somewhat later stage in life. But yes, if you know anything about pop culture, there are conventions, or cons in short, that have been an increasingly big thing over the last 50 years or so. The earliest one that I know of, and I'm sure there were earlier ones, was a Star Trek convention. Star Trek was canceled in 1969. And just a few years later, 1973, some diehard fans put together a convention, and they expected, I think in New York, they expected maybe 300 people to show up. 3,000 people did, and it just mushroomed from there. Dragon Con is not limited to Star Trek by any means. It is very, very eclectic, but it is one of the biggest cons in North America, to my knowledge. It's been going for around 30 years now. It takes place invariably over Labor Day weekend. It officially begins the Thursday before Labor Day, and it ends on Labor Day itself. It takes place in downtown Atlanta.
Always Atlanta.
Always Atlanta, in the convention area, and the 5 big convention hotels, the Hyatt Regency, the Marriott, are the official host hotels. The Westin, all of the big, the Hiltons, all these. Yes. But all the hotels in the middle of Atlanta sell out, because something like 85,000 people attend this from all over the world.
Wow.
And it's just an amazing experience. It goes 24/7. There are panels or tracks for just about every aspect of pop culture you care to name. Everything from skeptics and atheists to astronomers and scientists, to Victorians and occultists, to science fiction, to anime, to British comedy, to British drama, to board gaming, to military history.
Well, that sounds such an eclectic list. I mean, can we say military history is a part of pop culture? I mean, what is popular? I mean, pop being popular.
Yes.
These, I must make this observation. It appears these dividend or these abbreviations can be unfortunate. Like con has other, well, con, let's say you mean like trickery.
Like a con man.
Right. But no, that was abbreviated. And so popular culture, that just means what, there'd be no barriers to people on the street to just participating in this. It would not, or is there some, I guess, requirement to do this? Do you, for instance, Star Trek, do you have to be knowledgeable? Do they exclude people that don't know about the, who are the bad people? The Klingons? The Klingons, yes. Are they the bad people?
There can be some fan bases or fandoms, as they are called, that can be very cliquish. That if you don't know a certain amount or you don't have a costume that's exactly right, you tend to get cold-shouldered. But one of the interesting things about cons is that they tend to be very welcoming. A lot of people who are drawn to these things are nonconformists, they are creative, they look at life from outside the box. A lot of times they were marginalized in elementary school and in high school because they did march to a different drummer and looked at life in a different way. So that means that this community is very welcoming of people who are original, of people who are eccentric, of people who have made different lifestyle choices, and it tends to be a very tolerant, open community.
Well, that's a good thing. Now,
yes.
Apparently, an honor has come your way, as I heard you mention. Maybe you could explain that. You're on a panel to discuss what?
Yes, this will be my second Dragon Con panel, and I will be a presenter in the Trek track, which, as you will imagine, focuses on all things Star Trek. And I and a few friends of mine will be forming a panel, and the subject of this particular panel it's actually titled after a Star Trek episode, Return to Tomorrow, and it is about the continuing impact of the original series, which is now almost 60 years old, on modern iterations of Star Trek. So there's so many young people who are watching it now, they may not know the deep history and the deep lore, so we're going to try to enlighten them.
About how it was, who started it?
Yes, how it was envisioned.
Who was the writer in this?
And, the writers, the original progenitors of it.
And actually, they do touch on sort of timely subjects, do they not? I can recollect that. I mean, there are a lot of deep thought in some of the episodes.
Yes, I mean, some of them, there are now hundreds and hundreds of episodes spanning close to a dozen TV series and more than and something like a dozen movies. And of course, some of them are going to be fluff and some of them are going to be badly written, but at their best, they ponder some of the deep social, political, and even philosophical questions that our society deals with. So, and that is Star Trek at its best.
Is there, just thinking about that, it appears that there's, humans have always had an attraction for myths.
Yes.
So the idea that life is 1, 2, 3, and actually maybe our brains demand something more. Well, we really like to think there's, I don't know, demons that are in the attic, or 1,000 gold pieces in the backyard, or whatever, and also the idea of associating your ego with some fictional character that's triumphant. So I don't know, one of these popular culture characters, maybe, I don't know, Superman or whatever. So maybe you could wear a Superman costume and then in some ways feel that you are Superman. Is that one of the attractions?
Yes, that's one way of doing it, and that is an element known as costume play or cosplay, and
another abbreviation.
Yes,
okay.
Another abbreviation. And by no means do all of these 85,000 people at DragonCon cosplay, and it can be used as a verb or a noun. But many do. I'd conservatively guess somewhere between, I'd guess between a third and a half either do light cosplay or really serious cosplay. I'm an aficionado of lightsabers. I do a bit of martial arts. And lightsabers, of course, are from the Star Wars universe. And I recently had my first experience with a relatively serious cosplay. A friend of mine helped me put together a Sith Lord costume. And I had always been appreciative of these costumes that you see at DragonCon, but seeing the effort that went into this relatively simple costume, weeks and weeks, I mean, selecting and cutting and sewing and measuring. And this was a simple one. And then you go and see these extraordinarily beautiful, complex, often made with chain mail or metal plate. These are labors of love that as soon as DragonCon is over this year, right after Labor Day, they will immediately start preparing their costumes for the next one, because it will take them an entire year.
It's kind of like the Mardi Gras, is that right? Or
Yes.
Something along those lines. And do they get an award for the best costume? Or
there are competitions, and I think on Sunday night there is a competition called Masquerade that you can enter at beginner or intermediate level. But we didn't discuss this beforehand, but we can put a picture of me as a Sith Lord up on
Sith.
A Sith.
Yeah, I know syphilis works for that. That's nothing to do with that. No.
Sith is, and you speak, and this is interesting because Star Trek is always more scientifically or politically oriented, but Star Wars was the more mythological. And this came out, the original Star Wars came out at a very dark time in American history. We had just gone through Vietnam. We had just gone through Watergate. And George Lucas came up with this story about the good guys who wear white, the bad guys who wear black. The bad guys are evil authoritarians. They have no redeeming features. And the good guys get in touch with what's called the Force. I'm sure you've heard of the Force. And they use it as literally a force for good to defeat oppression and to defeat tyranny. It's the hero's journey as he comes to awareness of himself and what lies within him. And the reason why in 1977, if you remember, the lines went around the theater. The theaters were showing it 24/7.
Right.
This was before VCRs or streaming.
Right, yes.
I remember at the time hearing of somebody who had seen the movie 50 times, was that it captured the popular imagination, that it was the morality play that we needed for the time. And then, interestingly enough, about 2 more movies in, you saw this big evil empire defeated on a jungle planet by the little natives. And this was an analog for Vietnam, if you think about it. So yes, just like professional history, every generation of historians reads their own experiences, their own generation's experience into the history they write. Pop culture does the same thing. They look at the issues that are concerning them and they mythologize it, because that way you can examine it, I think, in a purer light and make hypotheticals out of it and game it out.
Now, the word dragon
Yes.
is the title of the festivities. Dragon is an ancient word, and it's a little spooky, and you could say that would represent incarnate evil.
Yes, the serpent, the beast.
I mean, is that's a little worthy of comment? Why is it called dragon? What about something else, like I don't know, some other turn of phrase?
Yes.
Bluebird Festival, for
yes.
instance, or something.
There are many different names, and there's nothing particularly sinister about this, except that dragon, of course, in addition to its sinister connotations, is also one of the most recognizable mythical creatures out there. I suppose it could also have been Unicorn Con. But you have, in New York, you have Comic Con. San Diego, you also have Comic Con. San Diego is actually, in terms of attendees, is a bigger one. It's got about 100,000, but it's more of a corporate 9 to 5 event. As I say, Dragon Con goes 24/7. You have in Washington, D.C., Awesome Con. And so I'd almost quote Juliet, what's in the name? It's not focusing in specifically on dragons by any means.
Well, I mean, it seems to be a pretty interesting field of inquiry as to this phenomenon, which has escaped me, but it's obviously a substantial event. What would a sociologist say? You mentioned sort of the impulse to do this. Are there any political, does everyone support, I don't know, Palestine? Is there any other thing that's obvious, or any political parties, the American flags being flown or burned? Any comments about that?
In my experience, there have been a few controversies when a cosplay or a sign has become a little bit too overtly political. I remember several years ago there was a cosplay that I think in retrospect it turned out to be inadvertent, but it looked like the Twin Towers burning down, and this created quite a stir. I do think that the demographic tends to skew rather left of center. Once again, we are dealing with nonconformists here, and the demographic tends to skew younger, although as you can tell, I'm not a spring chicken, and this is one of my great outings. There is a Dragon Con over 40 group, a Dragon Con over 60 group. So this is
really?
This is by no means limited to youth, but it does skew young.
I see.
But the overt politics tend to be kept out. And I do know people who attend Dragon Con who are rather conservative politically.
Yes.
But I would think your typical one would be rather left of center. I don't expect to see any big political demonstrations this year, but you never know. I will say that street preachers come out in force, and they tend to be condemning of the attendees as being on the road to hell, and you get some unpleasant back and forth with that. But no overt politics.
It seem to be. I mean, 85,000 people night and day for a number of days. Are there any incidences that take place? I mean, any street crime or any?
Oh, yes,
I mean,
yes.
Is it rather dangerous? Do you feel safe there? I mean, also if people are in costumes,
yes,
maybe they're in a disguise. Another thing to say is that they're disguised.
Yes.
Or maybe they could. I guess maybe if they're obvious, this Batman hit me, and there he is over there. Right.
Well, if the costume is too elaborate, it's going to be hard for you to run and escape in that costume. Right. So you have to be fairly simple. If you're in the hotel district, the three big hotels, as a matter of fact, the Hilton, the Marriott, and if you've been in the Marriott, it's just a work of art inside.
Is that the one that's in the, it's like an elevator in the middle of it, or maybe that's something else?
Yes,
oh, okay.
And you know the Regency, which also, the Blue Dome.
That's
a Portman. Yeah, so
Portman did that,
yes.
right? It was his
Yes,
thing.
so you have the Hyatt Regency and then the Marriott, which frankly dwarfs the Regency, and then the Hilton, and those are all joined by sky bridges, and that's really the heart of the convention. And you have to have a badge essentially to get in during Dragon Con. So there is a little security there. The Westin and the Cortland Grand are within a block away. So when you're in that region, it's relatively safe. Now, as you move beyond that region, it starts getting a little bit sketchier. And once again, a lot of people are moving beyond that region because the five big hotels can't possibly accommodate everyone. And then, of course, there are the usual drunken confrontations that take place because at night there is definitely a party aspect to it. There are raves that go on. Do you know the word rave?
Not exactly, no.
A rave began as sort of a pickup party in an abandoned warehouse, often with drugs and really loud music that would go on all night. Now, obviously, DragonCon does not officially countenance drugs, but there are massive parties every night in every hotel during the duration of this for the less serious-minded. I will attend some of the military history panels, some of the Victorian studies panels, but then there are those who are much more whimsical and are there for the parties.
The Victorian study panel, I mean,
Yes.
Is that too far away from an English literature convention? I mean,
There are a lot
I know
of-
you're a historian. I mean,
Yes.
what's the difference? I mean, people are in unusual costumes when they discuss.
Oh yes, the full Victorian dress.
But is the
yes.
conversation, well, we're going to discuss Dickens, whatever, and seriously, and here I've got to.
Usually it's a bit more whimsical than that, but several of these panels can become very serious. In Victorian studies, there some of the late night stuff that's Victorian erotica. There is
guess there's such a thing, yes.
Victorian spiritualism and occultism. There is steampunk, which is a fascinating phenomenon. What if we took the technology of the late Victorian and Edwardian age and envisioned this technology as being able to do what our 21st century technology can do? So you might have a wristwatch with vacuum tubes, either as a prop or sometimes actually
Yes,
working.
yes.
And so people will do these steampunk cosplays. And it's a fascinating phenomenon. There are entire cons dedicated to steampunk. And so Victorian studies, that's a big draw for the steampunk people. But these can get very serious. I went once to a panel discussing Captain America and how when Steve Rogers, the original Captain America, had retired and another one took his place, was he being true to the principles of American exceptionalism? And there was a very deep discussion of that, and that went into what America stands for and is supposed to stand for. And you have this very erudite group of panelists and attendees who are participating in this. So once again, pop culture is not necessarily light and frivolous. It may just be a popular way of attacking a very serious social or political issue.
So is this a way of sneaking up on the establishment? We'll
Absolutely.
imagine the establishment has a great fortress, and this is going through the kitchen to attack the establishment.
Oh,
Is that-
absolutely. I think you'd find a great many activists at DragonCon.
And who organizes this? And that's question one. And question two, is there money to be made in doing this? Humans being what they are, or people selling, I don't know what, shields or
Oh, yes.
I don't know, helmets, whatever.
Well, there is a cost of attendance. It's run by a corporation, but with
is somebody is it a nonprofit or someone's making money?
I think
on
it's for profit. Now, San Diego Comic Con, I think, is definitely for profit. The difference with DragonCon is there is far more fan input, attendee input into this. The ticket price is actually quite reasonable. The ticket itself for all 5 days is $160. But once you're there are art galleries. The Vendors Mart is in America's Mart Building 6, and it takes up 5 floors. And so obviously the stalls, there's a rental fee for the stalls. It's a multi-million-dollar event, definitely. But you don't, I do not see any obvious political agenda being pushed either by the organizers or by the fan base.
Well, I guess the power of the media is tremendous, and so you can almost, your brain, you're sitting there, your eyes are open, and you're seeing you're being swept up in another reality. The reality is more attractive than the one you live in. And so maybe it's therapeutic to go in that direction. And we then get into whatever the little glasses, the other reality. How would that work out with this particular group of people?
Well,
I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah, oh, yes, indeed. Well, there is a very big group of con-goers, the nerd or the geek community. And once again, this is by no means applicable to all of these attendees. But there is a clique or a group, and the stereotypical view is that even though they're in their 20s or maybe even their early 30s and typically male, they have never really gotten over their adolescence. They are very introverted. They are socially awkward. They do not like associating with real people. They will game and keep the world at arm's length and be lost in their gaming. And their personal hygiene is not great because they're not around other people very much. And yes, they do prefer that to reality. And they are a presence at DragonCon because they are a big part of the nerd and geek community.
Well, I mean, it's humans being what they are. There's all kinds of diverse creatures in God's planet here with all kinds of diverse behaviors. What about in other countries? I guess, I don't know how well we made the point that there's a little universality to this phenomenon. Is it present in other countries, or is this the kind of thing that's only possible in the USA because of our wealth and just general?
Yes.
We can handle this, but
well,
maybe the Russians could not, so to speak.
Well, yes, certainly it's a very big deal in America, but I think you would also find a good bit of it in Western Europe. I think you find some of it in the Pacific Rim, especially those that have had Western influence like Australia, New Zealand. Japan itself has a Disneyland, so it's by no means limited to the United States, although once again, people come from literally all over the world to go to DragonCon. They'll show up several days early and stay for a week or two, and so it's definitely a worldwide and internationalist culture.
Well, can you anticipate what I think you're a presenter, what exactly is going to happen? Are you going to work on this and you're going to discuss, not to let the cat out of the bag, but what would you do? You say, well, I'm going to make some statements about, I don't know, Princess Leia in the Star Wars second presentation, and what did she really mean when she saw, I don't know, the Shining Prince? What are we relating to in this drama? Is it something like that, almost like an English dissection, or are you going? Or what are your plans on your presentation?
Well, you can do that. Although I'll be doing Star Trek and not Star Wars, and there is those are very different fandoms. Although there's a lot of overlap. No, once again, my presentation is already pretty much accomplished. I've written my part of it and sent it on to my fellow panelists, but this will be a history of early Star Trek. That Gene Roddenberry, the man who came up with Star Trek, he'd been in the military, he had been a World War II bomber pilot. I think he had been largely influenced by that to want a more peaceful world. And so he envisioned in his writing a future for humanity in which the basic sources of the conflict that we had in the 20th century were behind us, and we could turn now to exploring more interaction, peaceful interaction with other cultures and understanding of ourselves. So I'll be taking the historian's approach to it. But you mentioned Princess Leia. I mean, once again,
I surprised myself, but okay.
No, but yeah, this has become the subject of a huge sociological study. The idea of the strong female character, the person who is who exercises exercises power, even though she doesn't fit the traditional paradigm. And Star Trek is that too. Star Trek was always the word we would use today is woke. It was always pushing the envelope and looking at things in a new way. That one of the very first main African American characters on television was Star Trek, Nichelle Nichols. She was the communications officer. And she inspired a generation of African American women, including Mae Jemison, who was the first honest-to-goodness African American female astronaut. Whoopi Goldberg, who told the story very famously when she was watching Star Trek. She went running to her mother and said, "Mama, there's a black lady on TV and she ain't no maid." That Nichelle Nichols met Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, "I'm a great admirer. My children are admirers of you." And she said, well, thank you, but I'm thinking of leaving the series. And he said, "You cannot do that. You are achieving more as a role model on that show than just about any other African American in the country right now." Star Trek featured arguably the first interracial kiss between Captain Kirk, who was white, and Lieutenant Uhura, Nichelle Nichols. So much so that a lot of Southern TV stations would not run the episode in the 60s. So, it's really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. Female commanders. So.
Well, maybe that's what fiction can do,
Yes.
as it sneaks in through the kitchen into the fortress. So maybe that's a way that change happens.
Well, there is a commonly held belief, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, that a lot of the technology used today, including the cell phone in your pocket,
Yes.
Was developed by people who saw it on Star Trek and wanted it in real life, and that's how we got them.
Well, thank you so much, Buck. It's been
Thank
a
you.
very useful, interesting inquiry.
Thank you, sir.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.